The Pittsburgh Steelers have a tendency of being a good drafting team and getting players at different positions. And I have to say, I think they did it again. I think the Steelers had a very good draft class, even if the pick at 20 might not hit. Kenny Pickett is obviously the big name of this draft class, and, for good reason. It's quarterback. He was also apparently the only quarterback the NFL was remotely interested in because he went at 20. The next one to go was Desmond Ridder in round 3, which was surprising to me. I am definitely a little bit shocked that, the NFL wasn't more into some of these other quarterbacks, or they viewed Pickett so differently than these other guys, or maybe just no other team felt it was worth taking that chance of that high of a pick. That's also a possibility. Pickett has drawn some Mac Jones comparisons. He goes at 20. The consensus big board was had him at 21, so that's what you see on the screen. Number on the left, that is where each of these players went, and then right next to their name, that is going to be where they ended up on the consensus big board. So I like Pickett. I had him as my quarterback 3. I wasn't crazy about him, but I like him. Again, the Mac Jones comparisons, I don't know if those will hit. I was a much bigger fan of Mac Jones coming out than Kenny Pickett. But that being said, there is stuff to like about Pickett. And the reality is, quarterbacks are hard, so draft a bunch of them. You need a quarterback? All right, let's take him and see what happens. You also have Trubisky as a plan B or plan A, but probably plan B. If you draft a quarterback round 1, he's probably going to be the guy. So it'll be interesting to see what Pickett can do. And hey, it's cool. Played for Pitt, and now he plays for Pittsburgh. His last name is Pickett, which is kind of like, that almost rhymes. I don't know, sounds similar. Whatever. That was maybe the worst point I've ever made in any of my videos. Let's move on. Round 2, a guy who, this is where I think the draft got really interesting for the Steelers. They get George Pickens, who the consensus big board had him going around here, but a lot of people were higher on him, and especially when you saw that early wide receiver run and there were so many desperate teams for quarterback, George Pickens kind of still being there at 52. A lot of it is probably character concerns, like he got in fights constantly on the field, but you know what? He's a good player. I mean, he's really good. He was a top 5 wide receiver on my board. I don't really factor into character concerns and stuff too much, not too heavily. It matters, but not as much as I think people make it out to be. I don't know George Pickens, so how can I speak on that? So this just has, this, and we'll get to Calvin Austin in a second. This just has total, Steelers getting steals at the wide receiver position later on, in the makings, doesn't it? Isn't this classic Steelers? This is what they do. They always get good receivers later on, where they kind of get the guys who, this is smart team building strategy. Draft the receivers on day 2, because those guys have a pretty good hit rate, and that's how they've constantly been able to have solid receivers, despite not often spending a ton of high draft capital on them, because you don't have to. DeMarvin Leal is a very interesting guy. So he's someone who basically, he was, hey, this is, according to the consensus, this is actually getting a good value. He went at 84 in the NFL draft. The consensus had him at 56. So good value there. And I think a big part of why he fell is, so he had a really good 2020 season. 2021 took a massive step back. So that's just the question. He's an edge rusher, by the way. So, again, not a position of need necessarily. If he doesn't hit, you're good. So that's cool. But that's basically what you're doing, is you're hoping you can get the prospect that I think he was at one point, before the season started, projected in top 10 territory. He just sort of fell due to not having a very good year. So the question is, can he get back to that form? Was there a reason for 2021? So he's certainly an interesting prospect in his own right. And so is Calvin Austin. So Calvin Austin, little guy, but he can move. And it's, again, for the Steelers, I think they kind of want to have guys who can do several different things. Chase Claypool and Deontay Johnson are good at winning on the outside. So is George Pickens. So you're kind of a little bit crowded with those plus receivers, which means you need a slot guy. I think Austin could be that slot guy. Again, will he be out there every snap? Probably not, but teams could use a 4th wide receiver as well. Yes, it's a bit of a crowded room, but look at that value. 72nd on the consensus big board. He goes at pick 138. That's great value. That's 60 picks earlier than people thought he was going to go. Or excuse me, 60 picks later than people thought he was going to go. So take that chance Absolutely. So that's what I like about Austin. So yeah, again, definitely has the makings of someone who we could see in a couple of years being a good player and saying, how did he fall to 138? It's because of the size concerns, but Steelers maybe aren't too concerned about it. At pick 208, maybe a bit of a reach. Maybe this was a bit of a, hey, let's be nice to Cam Hayward and draft a relative of his in Connor Hayward, which this can't be a coincidence, right? That the Steelers now have, the Watt brothers, obviously not J.J. Watt, of course, but you have Derek Watt and T.J. Watt, and now you have the Haywards as well. Like, this can't be a coincidence, right? Also worth mentioning, if you're expecting a guy who is going to be this, Cam Hayward type, no, he is very much not that kind of guy. He is a running back, in fact. 6 feet tall, 230 pounds, so he's a bigger running back, at least. And that's kind of what's interesting. It doesn't seem like he's, going to really move the needle too much, but hey, the Steelers could use another running back, and it's better spending a 6th-round pick than a 1st-round pick on a running back, even though I do like Najee Harris. It's the value thing. Don't get running backs in the 1st, get him into 6th, and now they got one in the 6th. This is the smart move, I think. So that's cool. And then with the 225th pick, they went with Mark Robinson. So every time I see like a linebacker going round 7, part of me is like, are you a linebacker or are you a special teams guy? Probably a special teams guy is what I would assume. That's typically the way these things work. I did not get too far into my Mark Robinson film study, if we're being honest. So that's kind of, what happens there. But, interesting guy. Only 5'11", but 235 pounds. So that's where he's at. And then finally, another quarterback. I always like doubling down on quarterbacks. If you draft a guy, get another guy in that draft, right? You could have done one earlier. You could have gone with like a Bailey Zappi or even like a Sam Howell would have been interesting. But they decide to not do that. They still get one, again, at pick 241, Chris Aludicon, who is someone who I didn't really scout too much, which is weird because I scouted like way too many quarterbacks in this draft class. I think he was someone who was hard to get tape on, if I remember him correctly, although I know that there are some people who actually really like him. So he's an athletic guy who has good arm talent, and if you have that, like, hey, take a flyer on him. What's the worst that happens? You're missing out on a decent special teams guy? All right, so be it. It's pick 241. What's the worst that can happen? So that's why I think I like that pick as well. So yeah, as a whole, I like the Steelers draft class. A couple of good picks, of course, with the George Pickens and Calvin Austin. Those are my 2 favorites, but I also like Kenny Pickett. Again, there's a lot to like about Pickett. He's not the most can't-miss prospect, but that's why he was available at 20. You didn't have to go up and spend insane value. And guess what? If he doesn't work out, okay, cool, then draft someone next year, or maybe try to make a trade next year. They didn't spend a ton of value on him, but they also aren't going to just go into the season with a Mitchell Trubisky. This is the correct way to view it. Were there better quarterbacks on my board personally? Sure, but at the end of the day, who knows of quarterbacks? It's difficult, which is why you want to always be taking chances on them. So that's what I think about all of this stuff. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. What are your thoughts on Kenny Pickett? What are your thoughts on the Pittsburgh Steelers draft? Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.